Here's a question you have probably never asked. What was the first animal humans ever rode? You have cars, buses, trains, and planes. You complain about traffic. You complain about parking. But somewhere in your family tree, tens of thousands of years back, there is a person who looked at a large animal and thought, I am going to sit on that. That moment changed everything, and the animal they chose might surprise you. Spoiler alert, it was a horse. Okay, not that surprising, but here's the twist. The horse they rode does not exist anymore. Around 5,500 years ago in what is now Kazakhstan, a culture called the Botai did something no one had ever done. They climbed onto horses. We know this because their horses' teeth show bit wear, the marks left by rope or bone bits pulling against the mouth for years. They also drank horse milk, which means they kept the animals close. The Botai did not just ride horses, they built their entire lives around them. Meat from horses, milk from horses, hides from horses. The first horse riders in history ate their pets. Progress. Here's the part that nobody talks about, the first rider. Picture the moment. A wild horse, thousands of pounds of muscle and bad attitude standing in the grass. Some guy looks at it, then he looks at his friend, then he gets on. Nobody clapped. There were no witnesses, no camera, no trophy, no documentary crew. Just a man on a horse trying very hard not to fall off, while his entire tribe watched in silence and thought, what is he doing? That man was the most important person in the history of transportation, and we do not know his name. We do not know if he survived. We do not know if he fell off immediately, which he almost certainly did. But he started something. Now, before you give all the credit to the horse, you should know that horses were not the first animals humans tried to use. That honor belongs to the donkey. Donkeys were domesticated around 7,000 years ago in Northeast Africa, long before horses. They were calm, strong, and much easier to deal with than a horse. And humans rode them, loaded them, and made them carry everything. The donkey is the original rideshare, it just never got the marketing. But the first animal that humans tried to domesticate for transport was not a horse or a donkey. It was the onager. The onager is a wild ass from the Middle East, and the Sumerians tried to use them around 5,000 years ago. This went poorly. Onagers are stubborn, aggressive, and have a bite that can take off a finger. The Sumerians had to castrate them to make them calm enough to pull wagons, and even then, the onagers were a disaster. The name onager literally means wild ass, and the species is called hemione, which means half-ass. The Sumerians spent centuries trying to domesticate an animal whose scientific name translates to half-ass. They had a wheel. They had a civilization. They could not fix this. You might wonder why they did not just wait for horses, because horses were still local to the steppes of Central Asia. The Middle East did not have them yet. So the Sumerians made do with angry donkeys, and they built an entire empire on the backs of animals that tried to bite them every day. That is the origin of civilization: cuneiform, law codes, ziggurats, and a guy getting kicked by a half-ass. Meanwhile, back in Kazakhstan, the Botai were doing something even more remarkable. They were riding horses so well that they changed the course of human history. But here is the funny part. The Botai horses were not the ancestors of modern domestic horses. In 2021, a genetic study found that modern domestic horses descend from a different lineage, one that appeared around 4,200 years ago in the Volga-Don region of Russia. The Botai horses, the first ridden horses in history, went extinct as a domestic line. Their descendants survive as Przewalski's horses, the last truly wild horses in the world. So the first animal humans rode was a horse that no longer exists. You cannot ride your way back to the beginning. The beginning is gone. Now, let us talk about the animals that never made it. Africa had the best animals on Earth: elephants, rhinos, zebras, giraffes, all of them right there. And none of them were rideable. The zebra is the great tragedy of domestication. It looks like a horse with a paint job. It should work. It does not work. Zebras are aggressive, unpredictable, and they bite. They have a reflex that makes them bite whatever is in front of them, and they never lose it. In the 1800s, a wealthy man in London named Lord Rothschild tried to fix this. He trained zebras to pull a carriage through the streets. It worked, technically, but the zebras remained dangerous and the experiment was abandoned.
Africa had the perfect riding animals and could not use any of them. Meanwhile, Europe had the horse and accidentally won the history lottery. Other animals did get their moment. In Arabia, people domesticated the camel around 3,000 years ago, and it became the ship of the desert, carrying people and goods across sand that horses could not cross. In the Arctic, the Sami people domesticated reindeer and rode them, milked them, and used them to pull sleds. If you have ever seen a reindeer pulling a sleigh, you already know the story, because that is where Santa Claus comes from. Ancient humans were riding reindeer thousands of years before the first Christmas. And in India, people tried elephants. Elephants are intelligent, powerful, and impossible to miss. They are also impossible to control once they decide they do not want to be controlled. You can ride an elephant for years, and one day it will just decide to leave, with you still on it. The elephant is the only animal that can quit its job. The real lesson of the first ride is not about the animal, it is about the moment. Somewhere on the steppe, a human being looked at fear and decided to sit on it. Every rider since then, every horse race, every cowboy, every kid at a pony ride, every video game where you press a button to mount a horse, is a descendant of that first insane decision. You are probably wondering when the horse actually changed everything. That happened around 5,000 years ago, when a culture called the Yamnaya appeared on the steppes north of the Black Sea. They had horses, they had wheels, and they had a very bad attitude. The Yamnaya rode out of the steppe with their horses and carts and spread across Europe and Asia in one of the fastest expansions in human history. In just a few centuries, they covered thousands of kilometers, and their DNA is now everywhere. If you are reading this and you have European ancestry, you are partly Yamnaya. You are descended from horse people, which means that man in Kazakhstan, the one who fell off the horse, is your ancestor too. And he probably did not fall off. He probably got back on. That is the whole story of human progress, getting back on. What made the Yamnaya so unstoppable was not just the horse, it was the combination. Horse, wheel, and a stone hammer called a battle axe. They were the first culture to have all three at once. Other groups had horses or wheels or axes. The Yamnaya had everything, and they were not shy about using it. They buried their leaders under mounds called kurgans, sometimes with the horses themselves, so the dead could keep riding in the afterlife. They did not write anything down, so we know almost nothing about their language, their music, or their jokes. But we know they had horses, wheels, and a willingness to move. That was enough. The next time someone tells you that all you need is one good skill, remember the Yamnaya. They had three, and they used them to rewrite the genetic map of an entire continent. Their greatest invention was not the wheel or the horse, it was the decision to leave. So the next time you complain about traffic, or you see a horse, or you play a video game where you summon a horse from thin air, remember the first rider, the one who had no saddle, no stirrups, no helmet, no insurance, and absolutely no idea what he was doing. He changed the world more than any king or general ever did, and nobody even wrote his name down. The first animal humans rode was a horse that does not exist anymore. A horse that carried the entire future of transportation on its back, with a confused man on top of it, gripping its mane with both hands, hoping for the best. That is how every great story in history starts. Someone getting on something they do not fully understand and hoping it works out.